Hello, this is Dr. Paul Cottrell, and I would like to talk about mpox and the outbreak in Africa. I'm recording this on August 15th. It is important for you to get educated about this subject. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this thing in three parts. One part is to talk about the science of what we know about pox viruses and mpox particularly, and what has been published in the news, and then also a brief history about smallpox. Because if this outbreak isn't contained within Africa and it gets to other countries and it becomes more widespread, it could be a similar situation to the outbreaks of smallpox in past history. Okay. It's low probability, so don't get worried, but it's a potentiality. In addition, I am concerned about the juxtaposition of this outbreak with the general election in the United States and the juxtaposition of the outbreak dealing with the wars in the Middle East and in Europe, potentially even Asia. Because I've been saying for a while that I think that it's going to flare up in Asia here. Okay, so does that mean it's just a natural phenomena? Does that mean that there's some sort of nefarious human actor? Or, it's possible. Some people would think I'm crazy to say this, but we may be living in times that are very metaphysical, very Kabbalistic, very biblical, and that we are actually seeing throughout the world these different plagues and destructions and quote natural phenomena that are hurting mankind. I haven't heard anyone really adequately prove either way the events that we're seeing in such a short amount of time around the world is biblical or not biblical. Some sort of biblical significance, or what I call metaphysical, versus just physical. All right. So it could be interpreted as it's metaphysical. It could be interpreted as just a coincidence. We don't know. All right. But the thing is that you need to get educated about this. So please support my work by making sure that you follow all my channels. I have 4 channels on YouTube. I have Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. Please follow me on X and on GETTR. That way you get notifications, because what I've been noticing is some people are not getting notifications until the premiere is over or halfway through. So please make sure that you subscribe to all the channels and follow me on these social media platforms. All the links are in the description. In addition, if you'd like to help support my work, because I have thousands of videos that are out there for free, please donate on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. You can donate through Stripe, PayPal, or Buy Me a Coffee. Those links are at the bottom of the homepage of my website. You can also be a paid member to my Patreon channel. The link is in the description of this video. It'll take you to that channel, and then you can subscribe that way. If you're a higher tier member on Patreon, you also get some lectures that I've done in pulmonology and immunology. You'll get the video of that. So please help support my work. In addition, it's really important for you to pay attention to what I have to say in terms of how things are starting to emerge in the battle space and also in our health. You really should go to my store and get the anti-Fauci advanced box or the deluxe box. All right. That is the protocol to be able to neutralize pathogens, bring down inflammation, soak up those free radicals, and be able to improve your immune system. All right. If you do that, get the deluxe box or get the advanced box, and that's the one click. If you can, you should add stuff to that I have been talking about for many, many, many videos on what you need to do. So please pay attention. You need to get prepared. I don't believe that this cold season that is coming up is going to be benign. I think it's going to be a little bit, I think that this cold season could be problematic. I can't guarantee it, but I think it's best that you prepare and that it's best that you boost up your immune system. You can take my advice or not take my advice. It's up to you. But I'm telling you that all these little other variables are coming in alignment where there's a potentiality of problem. And people's immune systems, most people's immune systems are weakened from the crisis of 2020 and that after effect of it. Take my advice or don't take my advice. It's up to you. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Link is in the description of this video. And get the Max 35 or the Max 14. You gargle with it, take a teaspoon of liquid, gargle with it, swish it in your mouth for 20 seconds or so, and then swallow it. It'll neutralize the pathogens and maintain that mucosal barrier. That's really important. You should be doing that every day. If you're not feeling well because of the cold season or whatever, then take a tablespoon or two a day. I also have it in a ppm 30 ppms. So you have 3 versions of the structural nanosilver liquid on my store. Get the structural nanosilver soaps, very high quality, way better than Dove. And this one happens to be charcoal tea tree. I have 5 different versions of the soap. So please go to the store and get a couple bars for your household. Really important to have good oral hygiene. This toothpaste neutralizes pathogens, reduces gum inflammation, whitens your teeth, freshens your breath. And by doing that on a regular basis, you're reducing the chances of getting something. And in addition, with good oral hygiene, you're going to improve your cardiovascular health and your valvular health. So go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get a couple tubes of this toothpaste. It's way better than anything that Alex Jones sells. So you might as well support Dr. Paul Cottrell than Alex Jones, because Dr. Paul Cottrell knows more about what's really going on than Alex Jones. All right. Structural nanosilver gel. This is really important to neutralize pathogens. You should be getting this, trust me. And then I also have it in another form, tube form. Where is it? Where's the tube? I don't see it at the moment. Oh, here it is. All right, I got 2 types. All right, you have it in the container or the tube form. So silver gel, you put it on your hands, it'll stay active for 5 hours, it'll neutralize pathogens. You can put it around your mouth, around your nose, around your eyes, around your ears. You can lightly coat your nostrils. It'll stay active for 5 hours. Really important to do, especially during the cold season. Trust me on this. And then in addition, you can use it as a normal skincare, put it on your skin, and you'll notice that your skin is clearer and tighter, especially around your face. The best way to do it, if you're using skincare, is just put it on your skin right before you go to bed, and then exfoliate in the morning. And then that would be your daily skincare routine. In addition, it's really important to lightly coat your nostrils with the gel, all right? A great way to do it is, like, in the morning, right? And you're going to work or whatever, and then you just lightly coat it. That will maintain that mucosal barrier, maintain that the epithelial lining, all right? Protect it, and then also neutralize the pathogen. In addition, do that at night, right before you go to bed, okay? Just lightly coat, not a lot, but you'll notice at night you'll be able to actually breathe better. So, so it's really important to get this. It's a dual product. It has a dual purpose product. Skincare, neutralizes pathogens. It'll also help to heal minor burns, abrasions, and cuts. So please go to my store and get the structural nanosilver gel. Oh, by the way, this product is better than what Alex Jones provides too. And lastly, really important, trust me on this, really important as we're getting into the cold season to get a few bags of the lozenges and the drops. Why? Because this is made from structural nanosilver. All right, I have it in elderberry zinc lozenges in 21 count. I have honey lemon drops and blueberry drops in 100 count. All right, why is this important? The moment you're starting to feel a little bit of irritation, take the drops or the lozenges and get those secretions, and it will neutralize the pathogen. It has structural nanosilver, and it'll neutralize the pathogen, and it'll also maintain the mucosal barrier. Right? That's really important, because if you have a little bit of a problem with that mucosal barrier, you may get a worse infection. All right, so it's really important. The moment you start feeling a little tickle or a little irritation, you need to take the lozenges right away. The same thing, you can start gargling right away with the liquid. Now, the ones that buy the liquid, it's really important to put the liquid in these applicators. Get an applicator set that's on my store. You get a spritzer, a dropper, and a nasal spray. The key is that the moment you start feeling something, you need to neutralize it right away. All right. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the drops. Get a few bags for your household so you are ready for this. All right, for the cold season. Independent on outbreaks and pandemics and all that. All right, just the normal cold season. People don't realize that to fully recover from it, even if you're healthy, all right, and you only had a cold for 5 or 7 days, it takes 3 to 4 weeks to fully remodel the damaged cells because of the cold, especially if you had a respiratory infection. And most people get sick 2 or 3 times a year. That means that your body is trying to heal 1/4 of the year. Every year. Now, do you understand why people get old fast? So take my advice or not take my advice. It's up to you. And believe me, what I just said is profound, much more profound than anything Alex Jones said. What I just said about neutralizing early so you're preventing the 3 to 4 weeks of remodeling of tissue. So take my advice or don't take my advice. Get the lozenges, and you're going to be better off than most people. All right, with that said, we're going to get to I want to get to the science of this, okay? Because there's a lot to cover. There's a lot to cover on this. Okay. So, in comparison to other viruses, mpox is a much more complex and more involved virus. And our understanding, scientific understanding of pox viruses like smallpox, cowpox, mpox, right, is lacking. There's a lot that the scientific community doesn't know compared to other viruses like coronaviruses, adenoviruses, or noroviruses, or other types of viruses like retroviruses, like HIV. We know more about HIV than we know about pox. So, all right. So okay. So keep that in mind, that there's a lot that is unknown, but there is some that is known. So, with the mpox, it is important to realize that Moderna is developing a vaccine, and that is mRNA-1769. It's in phase 1, And there's two ways that they are doing this, okay? My understanding, let me give you a little bit more details here, because I researched this a little while back, about 2 months ago. Hold on, I gotta find it. About 2 months ago, I looked into this, what Moderna was doing. Okay, so what they would focus on in the vax would be the M1, the A29, the B6, and the A38 proteins. Okay, or the M1, the H3, the A29, the E8, the B6, and the A35 proteins. Okay, so they would use that to elicit an immune response to block these proteins. Okay, so that's the platform. They're focusing on an M1, A29, B6, and A35, or the combo M1, H3, A29, E8, B6, and A35. Okay, so that's what Moderna's doing. It's phase 1. All right, now, and it's important to mention that because of a lack of people wanting to take other wonderful inoculations from Moderna, their sales have been going down. So just keep that in mind. So with mpox, it is a double-stranded DNA genome, different than some other viruses, and it's a lot bigger. All right. Like for example, the SARS-CoV-2 is 30,000. All right, bases. Well, a pox virus is like 100,000 or 200,000. All right, so it's the pox virus. All right, the genus is a ortho pox virus, and there's two types. There's a clade 1 and clade 2, and clade 2 has an A and a B. So you have clade 1 and clade 2. All right. Now, that big outbreak that we had in 2022 is clade 2, but it is primarily clade 2B. Okay. And that happened in 2022 to 2023. Now, there's also a clade 1 that is primarily in DRC. Okay. And this is more severe and there's more mortality. Okay. And that's what's currently going on. Now, you can find the mpox in obviously monkeys, but also rats, mice, and squirrels, certain types of rats, mice, and squirrels. The genome is 190,000 bases. Okay, so it's a big genome compared to the 30,000 in SARS-CoV-2. Because it's a larger genome, it's going to be coding for more proteins, and that's why pox viruses are much more complicated than some of these other viruses. pox viruses are much larger and much more complicated than even HIV. And HIV is pretty complicated. So it codes for about 191 proteins. That's a lot, right? So it's pretty intense. Now, because it's so large, it typically has to come up with other mechanisms to evade the immune system. The smaller the virus, the harder it is for the immune system to detect it. But large viruses have a tendency to be a little bit in between kind of a bacteria and a virus, kind of. I'm seeing this in just kind of a relative sense. All right, large viruses are harder to evade the immune system because they're so large that there's so many epitopes on the surface that it will be detected. So what happens is that just through evolutionary selection, these viruses come and design ways to evade the immune system. All right. And this is part of the reason why it's so hard to kind of study these. All right. Because they're large, but the ones that have survived through natural selection ended up developing methods to evade the immune system. And I'll go into detail on what I mean by that. All right. So large viruses are harder, okay, to evade the immune system, but pox viruses have evolved in such a way where they're playing around the immune system. Now, keep in mind, our immune systems are perturbated because of the 2020 crisis and the aftershock of it. Many people have dysfunctional immune systems. Either they're overactive, so they have an autoimmune disorder, or they're underactive and they have something what I call AIDS-like syndrome. All right, so with that in mind, so the research is going back to what they were doing with vaccines for smallpox. All right, and some of the studies that they had from that, plus some studies that they learned from cowpox and some additional studies on mpox. So there's a combination of things because there's similar conserved regions of the genome. All right, one conserved region of the genome is E3L, and this inhibits IFN, so interferon. It inhibits the interferon that's in the cell. Okay, so this E3 protein can prevent the activation of other pathways like PKR, which we talked about before, MDA5, RIG1, and OAS. Okay, so it's inhibiting an antiviral capability of a cell. Okay, so it's a big virus, but it gets in and it plays around with the innate immune system. So that's one way that it does it. There's also additional ways. Now, from research from cowpox, cowpox can inhibit the MHC1 transporter. So what that does is that by inhibiting it, it's not activating CD8 positives. Okay, so that's what cowpox does. And when you're not activating CD8s, you can't kill the infected cell. Well, mpox doesn't do it that way. Mpox does not inhibit MHC1. Okay, does it differently. It blocks CD4 positive and CD4/8 positives after there is cell-to-cell contact. All right, a cognate. What's called a cognate. So you have a CD8 or a CD4 cognate to a cell that's been infected with mpox. And what this does is it's blocking CD4 positive and CD8 positive activation. All right. So that means that locally, it's suppressing the immune system. All right. This is important. So what it does is that this capability that mpox has locally suppresses the immune system by blocking activation of CD8 positive and CD4 positive cells. When you do that locally, the body doesn't know that there is a systemic immunosuppression. It's only local. Okay. So it's tricky. It's like mpox is a tricky virus. All right. And then when you're not, think about this. If you just local suppression of the immune system by blocking CD4 and CD8s, but not systemic immune suppression. So what will happen is that the body doesn't know that there's a reservoir of mpox in a certain tissue because there's no communication. It's like stop the communication for the immune system to say, hey, I have something wrong. Okay. And so that allows it to divide and flare up. Okay. So, so keep that in mind. All right. So we have, that's the science of it. Now, we could spend lots of time to try to dive into the 191 genes and what they do and how they inhibit. Again, there's less known about pox viruses than, let's say, HIV or some of the other viruses that we've talked about. So with that, that's kind of the science of it, all right? It's a large genome. It inhibits the innate immune system and the adaptive immune system, all right? And it's blocking the CD4 positive and the CD8 positive activation when the cell is infected and a CD4 or CD8 touches that cell. The mpox has a mechanism where it prevents the activation. All right, but it's not because of blocking the MHC1 class transporter. Okay, so keep that in mind. And then you have the E3 protein that's blocking the innate immune system. All right. So let's play the videos. Before I do that, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the vitamin D3. It's really important as a gene expression cofactor. It helps to get rid of cells that need to go through apoptosis. All right. It also helps with absorbing calcium. So this is really important. You should be taking it every day for your health and to get rid of cells that are infected. Lignans, really important. Trust me on this. It's a powder. It boosts up your immune system, and it also helps with hormonal health. It's for males and females. This is really important for your immune system. And what I just said, there are things out there that are deregulating your CD4s and CD, and they're affecting the activation of the CD4 and the CD8s. Get the probiotic that I have. This is in veggie cap form. I also have it in a powdered form. You should be taking a probiotic every day for proper gut biome. Clarity factor, important to reduce that brain fog, get those neurons firing. Very important to maintain that neuroplasticity and to reduce memory loss, reduce the chances of neurodegeneration. It's really important to take every day, all right? Really important. So please go to my store and get the clarity factor. This is way better than anything Alex Jones is selling. So you know what? Stop supporting Alex Jones and helps support Dr. Paul Cottrell. Resveratrol, important to get rid of senescent cells. It's also an antioxidant, and it's synergistic with C60, which I will talk about a little later. Vitamin C, important to boost up your immune system, and it also helps with your skin. If you're not feeling well, take a double dose of vitamin C with the magnesium. So with that said, let's start with the videos.
The organization has declared that a fast-spreading new variant of the highly infectious disease mpox is a global health emergency. It's the second time in 2 years it's been declared as such. The continent's leading health body, the Africa Centers for Disease Control, had already warned it could spiral out of control unless measures are put in place to limit its spread. He is the Director General of the WHO making the announcement.
Today, the emergency committee met and advised me that, in its view, the situation constitutes a public health emergency of international concern. I have accepted that advice.
Our health correspondent Dominic Hughes told us what the announcement from the World Health Organization means.
This is the highest level of alert, really, that the World Health Organization can declare. It's on a par with what they did during the COVID pandemic, for example. Viewers might think back to those rather troubling days. This follows hard on the heels of a similar declaration by Africa's Centre for Disease Control yesterday, which declared this a public health emergency that was continent-wide. The World Health Organization's panel of experts has advised the Director General, as you were saying, that actually this is something that the international community really needs to be aware of. And what it is it's a call to arms, really, to try and mobilise not just medical resources, but political resources as well. So the WHO have said they're already on the ground, they are training staff, they are working on vaccines and treatments, they are in position on the ground, but really it's trying to mobilise resources, both financial, political, medical, to try and stop the spread of this virus. It's already, as you were saying in your introduction, it's endemic in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and the vast majority of cases so far this year have been in the DRC, but it's also spread to 15 other countries in Africa, and the concern is that it could spread beyond there too.
So the WHO will want, obviously, assistance from other countries. What does this mean for countries outside Africa as they consider what this might mean for them?
Well, it will mean that, for example, countries in Europe, for example, or the United States, in North and South America, they will ramp up their monitoring of cases. They'll be on extra high alert to see if any of these cases are present in their country. Because of the nature of mpox, it can sometimes be look little bit like chickenpox, for example. When you have those blisters, it starts with sort of flu-like symptoms, but within 1 to 5 days, you can develop these blisters on the skin, and that can sometimes be mistaken for chickenpox. So testing and making sure that those cases are identified quickly will be happening. But also then there's this sort of marshalling of resources to try and get the international community to donate not just medical resources, but money too, because the WHO says they've got a pot of about $13 million, but they clearly are going to need more than that if they're going to take serious action on the ground.
Okay, so really important, all right? A lot of people in the United States have had the chicken pox and they're okay, all right? No problem, all right? Especially baby boomers and Gen Xers and, and you get to a certain age and then you have to worry about shingles, all right? And there's ways to mitigate that, all right? But smallpox, mpox, that's much bigger of an issue than chickenpox, all right? You gotta pay attention to what I'm saying here, all right? In developed nations like the United States and in Europe, we don't have this issue, all right? Because it's been eradicated. No one that is, to my knowledge, that's living today has in Western countries has been quote, vaccinated for smallpox. All right. Because that was eradicated in I think it was in the early, I could be wrong on this. I mean, there may be some really elderly individuals. When was USA? When did the USA smallpox? Well, there was an outbreak. There was a natural outbreak that occurred in 1949 and in 1980. But people don't get that. The point I'm making is people don't get smallpox vaccinations. All right, that's not a common thing for the schedule. So the point I'm making is that no one has antibodies to smallpox. No one has antibodies for mpox unless they've had the infection or they have recently received an inoculation. Okay, so just keep that in mind. All right, there was a point in time where in developed nations, smallpox was eradicated. And so it wasn't an issue. And therefore it's not on the schedule. And, you know, unless you survive from smallpox or got cowpox somehow naturally, you don't have antibodies for it. You don't have cross-reactive antibodies for it. But of course, because of the outbreaks that are recent or in other countries, they may have been inoculated, had some sort of inoculation program. But smallpox was pretty much eradicated in developed nations for a long time. All right, so just keep that in mind. There's a potential that if whatever's coming out for mpox, whatever comes out, if it breaks out of Africa, all right, in mass, and that it's easy and it has an easy human-to-human transmission, then we got a problem. All right, and there's disfigurement, facial disfigurement that could take place. It could be death. So I mean, it's a different situation than what we went through in 2020. If big if this spreads worldwide, all right. The probability. This is why I say don't get too worried. Just be prepared. But the thing is that you got to be vigilant. If you're older and you start to see pox on your body, and you had chicken pox, when you were a kid or whatever, you know what? You need to be tested because that might be a problem. I'm concerned about porous borders. We know that the people that are coming in from the southern border in the United States are coming from multiple countries, not just from Central America or South America, but they're coming from Europe, they're coming from Africa, they're coming from Asia. So it's a problem. All right. The porous border could be a means for this to spread. In addition, there's a porous border between Africa's nations and the European Union. So even if you had someone that is traveling, all right, let's say they are asymptomatic, all right, they are in contact with someone, let's say, from Africa that happens to get sick, but they are in contact in Europe. And the person that received that contact ends up getting on a plane and coming to the United States and then starts developing symptoms, that person could be potentially a spreader of the virus, potentially. Now, again, this is different because it's not really respiratory. All right, you need fluid transmission, you need membrane to membrane transmission, close contact. There's some evidence of water droplet, respiratory droplet type transmission. but it's not as easy to transmit. All right, but it can be a problem. All right, so this is something that is serious, but not to be super worried about. I would say that this whole cow flu stuff with the bird flu and all that, and and the culling of the chickens, the biggest problem with that is probably food supply, milk, eggs, chicken. That supply is going to go down because of the problems on the farms. I'm not too worried about it becoming human to human transmission, right? Unless someone wants to nefariously make this happen, which is possible. But I'm not too worried about bird flu. I am more concerned about mpox. All right, but I'm not. I put that in a higher risk category, but not in a super risk category. All right, super low with avian flu, cow flu that's going on with the H5N1. That's super low risk. This mpox is higher than that, but for developed nations, as long as we maintain some sort of biosecurity, it's not going to be a problem. If we lose that biosecurity, it increases the risks of mpox being a problem. All right, so just pay attention to this. This is important. It's low risk, but higher risk than H5N1. So, it's a concern. I put it in the concern category, but not in like, oh my God, the sky is falling category, all right? At least not yet, right? But you need to boost up your immune system. I've been saying this for 4 years. So if you haven't been doing it already, it's your own damn fault. But pay attention. The thing is that these poxes, except chicken pox, but the smallpox, and some of its derivatives have been eradicated in developed nations for a long time. And so we haven't seen this we haven't seen this in our immunologically for generations. It's a problem, right? All right, it can be a potential huge problem, but it doesn't mean it would be. It's just that it's an elevated risk, okay? Should be concerned, but not over worried. All right. Let's play another video here.
Moving into the new place felt like throwing a party, except we forgot to invite the furniture. Yeah, there's a tasker for that.
Declared the mpox outbreak to be a global public health emergency following an outbreak of a new strain of the mpox virus in Africa. The virus, formerly known as monkeypox, can be passed on through close contact and causes flu-like symptoms and lesions on the body and can be deadly. It's now been detected in at least 13 African countries, but one country has been hit particularly hard, the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Mpox is surging across Africa, and this is ground zero. Thousands of cases have been reported in the Democratic Republic of Congo as a new outbreak grips the country. It's already claimed at least 450 lives, most of them children, and it's showing no sign of slowing down.
The detection and rapid spread of a new clade of mpox in eastern DRC, its detection in neighboring countries that had not previously reported mpox, and the potential for further spread within Africa and beyond is very worrying. In addition to add,
And if it spreads to developed nations, it's really important to understand we don't have cross-reactivity in our immune system for this because we've eradicated smallpox a long time ago. And it's not part of the schedule. All right, keep that in mind. And the way that it works is that it's really derivatives of either cowpox or the point I'm making here is that we don't have cross reactivity. So this could take off in developed nations. Now, most likely, it won't be on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. On our side of the Atlantic Ocean, it most likely will start in Europe or in the Middle East. But there is a lot of things that are going on between China and Africa. So it wouldn't be surprising that there's some sort of cross-contamination between activities in Africa and it gets to China or Asia.
Outbreaks of other clades of mpox in other parts of Africa, it's clear that a coordinated international response is essential to stop these outbreaks and save lives.
Formerly known as monkeypox, mpox spreads through close contact, including sex, causing flu-like symptoms and painful pus-filled lesions. But this new strain is proving more infectious and even more deadly. And experts fear the growing outbreak in...
I'm just going to interject a little bit. This is why I'm saying that this is a natural phenomenon, but can this be some sort of metaphysical plague because of all the crazy stuff that's going on in the world? There were 10 plagues before, the destruction of Egypt, right? We may be seeing a series of plagues around the world before we see a new era. The destruction of an old era and the beginning, the birth of a new era. We may be seeing it. This may be one of the plagues.
Africa could just be the tip of the iceberg.
We believe that it's already a risk for international spread, and of course, there is also the chance that it could spread beyond Africa to other regions of the world.
The World Health Organization last declared mpox an international health emergency in 2022, with cases in more than 70 countries. That was largely shut down with the help of vaccines and treatments in rich countries. But very few of those are available in Africa, and global health officials hope this new emergency declaration will kickstart an international effort to contain the disease.
Now, it's important to also mention. It's also important to mention that this is August, and a lot of budgetary things are happening, and this might be a situation where the WHO is begging for more funding, and they're just playing this up. It's a potential problem, but a case is a case, a death is a death, right? So I'm concerned about this. I'm concerned that if the biosecurity of developed nations fails, that there are going to be pockets of the population that are affected, and this not only could take your life, but could scar you for life if you survive. So it's a problem, and we don't have cross reactivity for this. Now, what basically would happen is, let's say if Germany ended up starting to get a lot of cases of mpox, what would happen is they would track and trace, right? Get to patient 0 for Germany and do a biosecurity ring. And in that biosecurity ring, between track and trace, what they would do is then they're going to be doing inoculations or quarantine, all right? And then so they have different rings, the infected ring, and then a ring that is out where people aren't having cases, but potentially could have cases. All right. Now, if people only walked, it would be a lot easier to contain. But because of driving cars on the Autobahn and traveling through airplanes, it's easy to have even that biosecurity ring around the infected ring to be porous. And other regions of the country or other countries or continents could get it. So this is really important to you know to control this fast. This could balloon out really bad. Now, then you start asking, like, why is it happening right now? Is this something that was released? Is this something that is just metaphysically, manifested because of a series of plagues of mankind? We don't know. We don't know. But it's scary. I mean, this is like, I just wish this crap would just go away. I don't even want to be talking about this anymore. But of course, I have followers that send me stuff about mpox and other viruses, and how the whole world is falling apart. And I can't, I can't go to sleep. So, maybe you feel the same way. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Goodnight formula, because you don't know if the world's falling apart because of mpox or nuclear war from Russia, or President Xi wants to take Taiwan, or the deep state wants to assassinate a president or whatever. Because there's 1,000 reasons why not to sleep. But please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Goodnight formula. It has tryptophan and melatonin in it. It'll allow you to get into 3 cycles of REM sleep, which is really important. It'll allow you to get into the deep sleep. What that does is that it will help you to be well rested in the morning. It will detoxify your body, because when you are in deep sleep, you're going to be detoxifying your body, especially your neurons, and you're going to be able to consolidate memory. So if you have chronic deprivation of sleep, then you're increasing the chances of loss of memory. You're increasing the garbage in your cells because you're detoxifying less naturally, and you're going to have less energy. So chronically, you're increasing the chances of dementia and memory loss and neurodegeneration. So it's really important to sleep. So go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Goodnight formula. It's the-studio-reykjavik.com. Link is in the description of this video. Get the Goodnight formula so you can sleep, because the world's coming, is going to hell because of mpox and H5N1 and the presidential election and whatever else is, the war in Ukraine and the war in Israel and the polluted world that we live in.
Virologist at the University of Leicester in the UK, I asked him to tell us more about the surge in mpox cases and how this outbreak differs from the one 2 years ago.
The difference is really due to the different clades of strains, if you like, of this mpox virus. The strain from 2 years ago was a global strain, and the clade 2, which is the so-called West African strain, and it proved to be much milder and more limited in terms of clinical severity than the original clade 1 virus. The one that's now spreading across Africa is a branch of the clade 1 virus, now termed clade 1b. And this is part of the original strain from the DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo. And this has a higher mortality, is more severe clinically, and may be increasing transmissibility compared to the original endemic clade 1a strain. From
now remember what I was saying. Okay, you had clade 1 and clade 2. All right, and that originally it was clade 2a and clade 2b, and the B, clade 2b, was the 2022-2023 blip up in mpox. But the clade 1 has mutated. Now there's 2 versions, clade 1a and clade 1b. The B, clade 1b, is this crazy stuff that's going on with the current outbreak as of this recording. All right, it's looking like that it's mutated in such a way where it's potentially increased the function of the E3 protein that I was telling you about the innate immune system, and the potentiality of local immune suppression by preventing the activation of CD4s and CD8s. All right. Now, the clade 1 line is higher mortality rate, more severe. So does this burn out because it's so severe? Or will there really be a better human-to-human transmission? I don't think anyone really knows yet. But because there's so many cases in such a short amount of time, it's looking like human-to-human transmission is better. And that local immunosuppression by the virus seems to have been enhanced. All right. Now, is that because of the coupling of the aftershock of 2020 and the weakening of the immune system on top of that? I don't know. We don't know. We don't know what the whole history of these patients were. The point here I'm making is that there's a big part of the society that has an immune system problem, either autoimmune disorder or underactive immune system disorder. So even if this spreads into a developed nation, it's going to be problematic. You don't have cross-reactivity. You have a large part of the population that have immune problems. Big issue, big issue. Now the question is clade 2B manipulated? I don't know. I don't think anyone knows. I can't say it is. I can't say it's not.
See.
Talk to us more about this transmissibility, because this mpox variant has now, this new strain has spread to 13 countries, the outbreak. Hundreds of people have died, mainly children. Why has this new variant been able to spread so quickly?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I think we're still looking into this, but the original strain...
I just told you, but he'll be behind because Dr. Paul Cottrell is always a little ahead.
On DRC, the clade 1A, if you like, was limited in terms of that it would only spread beyond maybe 3 or 4 generations, and then it would die out. It's often transmitted from animal reservoirs in the original endemic area. Now it looks like the virus has adapted better to human transmission. Again, something we saw with COVID-19 after several years. But this virus has been around in Africa for many more years. We've known about it for over 50 or 60 years. So I suspect that more cases, more human cases, are allowing the virus to evolve and transmit more efficiently between humans. Again, like we saw with COVID-19 and the SARS-CoV-2 virus.
How much of a difference do you think it'll make that the WHO has now declared the mpox outbreak to be a global public health emergency?
Oh, it shouldn't make a great difference. Normally these fakes, as we call them, PHDICs, tend to be announced when you want to release more funding and more resources to those particular epidemics or pandemic situations. And this should hopefully allow this release of funding and resources in those African countries. But of course, they are already quite strain resource limited.
Okay, so WHO, more than 14,000 mpox cases in Africa this year. All right, that's a lot. That's a lot in such a short amount of time. So not only is potentially the innate immune system being blocked better, and the deactivation or the inactivation of the CD4, CD8s capability of the mpox, but probably the fusion protein is improved.
In many other ways.
Should people outside of the affected regions be worried about their own health? Could this virus end up spreading much further? And if so, what precautions should people be taking?
Yes, of course. As we saw 2 years ago, the clade 2 strain spread globally along the so-called MSM network, the men who have sex with men sexual network. But this is much more indiscriminate. It seems to be spreading across the heterosexual population and other general populations. It may be less
And
transmissible.
it might, without doing further research, I suspect that the clade 2B had less capability for fusion. All right, because you could have mutations. Let's just look at this in 3 different categories. There's 191 proteins in mpox, so it could be a lot of things. But let's just try to simplify it. It could be wrong, but let's just try to simplify it to understand. We have fusion capability to allow for the cell to bring in the virus. All right. There's the shutting down of the innate immune system with the E3 protein, and then the capability of the proteins within mpox to prevent the activation of CD4 positives and CD8s. Okay. Now, it's possible, I don't know, but I'd have to research this a little bit more if it's even been published. But the thing is that it's possible that the fusion protein for the clade 2B, the fusion protein may have been better, and there was some sort of innate immune system mutation that made it less effective for the E protein, or maybe the proteins that prevent the CD4, CD8s activation locally is less effective. All right. Or it could be that maybe the CD4, CD8s have gone up, but the fusion protein lost efficiency. All right. But there was definitely something out of these 3 categories, something's changed without knowing what it is, because I didn't look into it. But there is a change in these 3 different categories generically. All right. There may be some more categories as we dive into it, but the thing is that I see these things as like 3 different categories: fusion area, shutting down of CD4, CD8, and shutting down the innate immune system. So, but something's changed. Something changed on B, clade 2B, and now we have a new variant that's clade 1B that seems to have increased its ability to fuse, increased its ability to bring down the CD4, CD8s.
2B strain turned out to be, but again, we need more data on this. And the way it transmits is through intimate, close contacts of saliva, kissing, touching with contaminated secretions. And also there's some evidence of close range aerosol transmission after a prolonged period of contact, like in a household, for example, or in an intimate relationship.
Right. Okay. Well, afraid we're going to have to leave it there. Julian, thank you very much for talking with us. That was virologist Julian Tang at the University of Leicester.
And this is the reason why I'm saying that, maybe this has, a play component to it, that it's like metaphysical. The society is devolving. It's not, the morality is really bad. Just look at what happened with the Olympics for Paris for 2024. The opening ceremonies were a disaster, and the ending ceremonies were a disaster. And it's like this almost like celebration of Satanism and celebration of destruction of family, and the destruction of country, and the destruction of religion. This is why I keep on saying that, you can go pretty far if you just focus on country, family, God, or religion. There's a moral compass there. There's an ethics that that's part of that core of those three categories. We're losing that. So maybe we're being punished, metaphysically, But it being a sexually transmitted disease, maybe targeting that whole aspect of humans' lack of morality. It targets scarring of the skin, scarring of the face. So we have, it's targeting on a society that's egocentric and it's only concerned about the superficial. So there's a lot of ways to kind of interpret this. Now, I don't know if it's metaphysical or not. I don't know, but there's something strange about it happening in the times that we're in right now. With the wars and everything that's going on now. Is it man-made? Is it man-released? It's possible. We don't know. I'm tired of looking at this type of stuff. All right, so next. All right, let's see.
Popeyes has the best of both wings. Our juicy chicken is marinated to perfection with 2 distinct twists on all 6 flavors. Whether you prefer our spicy bone-in wings or our...
More importantly, in this scenario...
The World Health Organization has declared a global public health emergency following an outbreak of the mpox virus in Africa. The WHO had been monitoring a surge in cases in the Congo. The new variant has spread to Burundi, Kenya, Rwanda, and Uganda. The infection can be passed on through close contacts. It causes flu-like symptoms and lesions on the body. The head of the WHO says the alert is necessary to save lives.
Today, the emergency committee met and advised me that, in its view, the situation constitutes a public health emergency of international concern. I have accepted that advice. It's clear that a coordinated international response is essential to stop these outbreaks and save lives. A public health emergency of international concern is the highest level of alarm under international health law.
Well, Anne Ramoyne is an expert on infectious diseases, professor of epidemiology at the UCLA Fielding School of Public Health. This brings us all back to what the pandemic and the last outbreak of mpox in 2022. How is this outbreak different, first of all?
Well, thanks for having me. And that's a very good question. I think when we think of these public health emergencies of international concern, sometimes we think of what's happened before. We think of COVID-19, of course, but more importantly, in this scenario, you should be thinking of the global outbreak of mpox that occurred in 2022. What we saw then was monkeypox virus, or now what we call mpox, spreading in a way that we had never seen it spread before, and spreading in new places where it had not been previously spreading. We're seeing a similar phenomenon, but this is this is the other clade, or the other strain of mpox, and we're seeing a similar phenomenon. We're seeing it spread in unprecedented ways. And so that's why the WHO committee has advised the Director General to call a public health emergency. And similarly, the Africa CDC has called an emergency.
My gut feeling on this, there's 3 things that could be potentially happening. A release where they took clade 1, A, and enhanced it. And they took clade 1 and enhanced it and re-released. The other potentiality is that this just emerged, all right, and just mutated, with or without. So there's two options out of that, with or without the suppressed immune system from the crisis of 2020 and the aftershock of it. All right. So let me rephrase it. It's possible that clade 1A was enhanced and released as clade 1B in targeting kids. It's possible that there is another option is that because of the weakened immune system from the 2020 crisis and the aftershock of it, that there was a selection for a mutation naturally that happened that created clade 1B for mpox. Or it naturally emerged without the effects of 2020's immune system disruption. Okay, so it's immune system disruption and natural mutation, or a mutation unrelated to the 2020 crisis, or mpox, clade 1A, modified in a laboratory and released to affect a larger population. I don't know which one. I don't even want to guess, putting probabilities on it. There is a suspicious feeling that I have that this breakout that is happening in Africa is happening at a time where Russia is losing ground because of the Ukrainians invading Kursk and other regions, and the potentiality of a full out escalation between Israel and Iran is really highly probable, especially between now, which is August 15th, and maybe even August 24th. I'm very concerned about the date, August 24th, just from a Kabbalistic reason, all right? So those are the three possibilities that I see. I don't know which one. I haven't really thought about like putting probabilities on it, what it is. Usually I do. I don't know, but I'm just saying that it's possible. Now, this may end up being very problematic. They think that Trump may win, and that this isn't a problem for 2024, but becomes a problem for his first year in 2025. It also could be a problem where it weakens the Western civilization, and it gives the opportunity for President Xi to invade Taiwan. It's potential. It's a problem. We don't know. Just because kids are getting pox on their skin doesn't mean that this doesn't turn into some sort of international war conflict, either by accident or on purpose.
Regional concern.
Mm-hmm. I believe children are most affected. Is that correct? So what precautions should people be taking?
Correct. What we've seen in the Democratic Republic of Congo is that we've seen a steady increase over the last many years of mpox. Some of this was anticipated as we continued to see reduction in number of people who had any kind of protective immunity against pox viruses due to smallpox vaccine. But this was much greater than what would have been anticipated. But in addition to that, we are also seeing sexual transmission in a variety of communities, both in sexual and gender minorities, also in people who are selling sex as well. So we're seeing this spread in different ways. So it's almost like there are two different outbreaks that are occurring at the same time. But by and large, what we're seeing is mpox spreading in a way that has not been seen previously.
Wow. How will this global alert from the WHO actually help fight off the disease in some way?
As I'm watching this, I'm getting this feeling that this is orchestrated, that this is on purpose. This is, I can't prove it, you know, like I did with other things that I've recorded, but I just get this feeling that there's this kind of like some sort of operation that's happening. There's this, it's real. These people are getting it. These people are affected. Some are dying. It's a real thing. But the thing, I get this feeling that there's some sort of operation that's going on. Some sort of, you know, people need to wake up. We're in exchange of bioweapons. We're in World War III. World War III, you know, we were taught young that it would be nuclear. It may not be nuclear. It may be unconventional, but it may not be nuclear. So we're in this, you know, very similar to like what was going on in World War I with the chemical weapons, right? And nerve gases being developed and all this stuff and being tested and deployed and all this. I just feel that there's a little bit of a CIA thing feel to this. What's going on in Africa? Is there a reason to do this? Is it some way of the United States preventing or slowing down the encroachment of China in Africa? Maybe. Has it something to do with resources, mineral resources? I don't know. Something, that spider sense goes up. It's not just, see, this is where a lot of the scientists get it wrong. It's just that they're not looking at this from a metadata, multiple silo perspective. There's something more going on here. The scientists will always knee jerk to zoonotic, nothing's nefarious, there's no sort of covert operation, and you know, there's no you know, bioweapon development. That's like, you know, they're in their little perfect bubble, right? But the world's a lot more complicated than that, and that, you know, there are things that people do, there's agencies or countries that do that affects world events for some reason. Maybe because of financial, it may be geopolitical, it may have something to do with resource allocation, something, all right? So that's why you got to look at this problem, is it's not just a medical issue. It's also something else. Because the reason being is to say, if you look at the probability of this, how can this kind of event be taking place in such a short amount of time from, quote, the natural, you know, novel experience that we went through in 2020, right? Which wasn't natural, it was man-made. But the thing is that, you know, that event is happening in such close proximity to this event, unless it has some sort of relation. Either it's released on purpose, or there is a synergistic effect because of the immune system, the AIDS-like syndrome that I've been talking about, right? That something's going on here.
This is actually a very important moment and really demonstrates that we've learned a lot from previous outbreaks or previous situations. You know, we've in the past maybe reacted a little more slowly when we see something happening in remote rural areas in Africa. But I think what we've learned here is that an infection anywhere is potentially an infection everywhere. And what's happening in rural areas of Africa can very easily come to our doorsteps anywhere in the world. And so being able to stop this at its source as soon as possible is critically important. And
so
this
if you look at, that's true, if you look at it from the medical scientific perspective. But if someone is releasing this to be able to move funds to WHO, do some sort of geopolitical power play, and curtail freedoms that accelerate what I've been calling the Biopatriot Act. This makes complete sense then. You know, so what seems to be rational to try to contain and to protect people's health ends up being an encroachment of people's civil liberties and the push for the Biopatriot Act. And this is the Biopatriot Act is in a supercharged version of the Patriot Act right after 9/11, and that is exactly what the national security state wants.
It will do many things. It will unlock funding that has not been available to really support surveillance, better testing opportunities, more efforts towards public health. But it's also going to help coordinate getting vaccines and therapeutics to these areas that have not had these tools to be able to combat mpox previously.
And just briefly, you mentioned this is an important moment. What are the chances of this being cut off from spreading even further than it has already spread?
Well, you know, it's going to be very important to be able to track it. And obviously, when we're talking about a virus like monkeypox, you know, it is something that spreads through sexual networks very.
It's possible that this becomes very problematic for the developed nations. I give it a 30% chance. But that's a lot higher than the issue with the H5N1 cow flu, right? There's a 30% chance that this becomes a problem for the developed nations, Europe, United States, and Asia proper, that are developed, the countries that are developed in Asia.
And we saw that with the global outbreak in 2022. This variant, there are a lot of questions around it. Traditionally, we thought this was a variant that might be create more severe disease, might be responsible for more deaths. We still need to study it to truly understand it, but it is possible that it could be a more serious variant. And so what we need to know is that we're dealing with a situation similar to what we saw in 2022. We can get in front of it with good information, with the tools that we have available, and it's not a moment too soon.
Fantastic. There's some good news in that from Anne Remoyne from the UCLA Fielding School of Public Health. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
When is this craziness going to end? Crazy, absolutely crazy. All right, let's get the Kenya perspective.
Please don't scroll. Listen to me. My name is Hiba from Gaza, and I'm supposed to be studying for my medical school final exams these days.
Now, Kenya has intensified surveillance and screening of travelers at the country's ports of entry in the wake of the declaration of mpox as a public health emergency on the continent. Now, the African Center for Disease Control has declared that the viral disease is a continental emergency following the spread of the disease that has killed hundreds across the continent since the beginning of the year. Was being broadcast with our very own Brenda Wanga.
The declaration by the African Center for Disease Control comes as the disease, formerly known as monkeypox, continued to spread across the globe and in Africa. The disease had been circulating in the world from 2022 and up to date. In Africa alone this year, the African CDC says 2,863 cases of the disease have been confirmed, resulting in 517 deaths, primarily in DR Congo. The CDC also states that the number of mpox in Africa has now surged past the 17,000 mark from 2022, but contends that the number could be higher due to challenges in surveillance, laboratory testing, and contact tracing. These cases are now hitting that much closer home on the continent. In the past few weeks, cases of mpox have been registered in Burundi, in Rwanda, Uganda, and one case in Kenya. The Ministry of Health says that that case in Kenya was reported on the 29th of last month, but the onset of the case had been early in June. Consequently, 12 people who were in contact with the 42-year-old male patient Zero have been traced.
After the confirmed case, we had other contacts, people who contacted the confirmed case, and there were about 12 contacts, and they were traced. The contact tracing went on, and they were brought forward. Their specimens were taken, and really everything was okay, turned negative.
The ministry also stated.
So she said June. And what happened in June? Rewind that here.
The Ministry of Health says that that case in Kenya was reported on the 29th of last month, but the onset of the case had been early in June. Consequently, 12 people who were in contact with the 42-year-old male patient Zero have been traced.
After the confirmed case, we had other contacts, people who contacted the confirmed case, and there were about 12 contacts, and they were traced. The contact tracing went on, and they were brought forward. Their specimens were taken, and really everything was okay, turned negative.
The ministry also states that there have been 20 suspected cases of the disease in 8 counties, including few weeks. Cases of mpox have been registered in Burundi, in Rwanda, Uganda, and one case in Kenya. The Ministry of Health says that that case in Kenya was reported on the 29th of last month, but the onset of the case had been early in June. Consequently, 12 people who were in contact with the 42-year-old male.
Early in June. Now, of course, this could be just coincidence. All right. Presidential debate was on June 27th. And I'm wondering if there was an orchestrated effort to try to create some sort of scare, international scare, to divert attention to the campaign between Trump and Biden. Now, of course, after the debate, I think it was a couple weeks later, 3 weeks later, something like that, he bails out. Biden steps aside, and then Harris is elevated. But I'm wondering. Now, it could be just coincidental. I'm just saying, it's important to just ask questions and like go, well, does that make sense or not?
Patient Zero have been traced.
After the confirmed case, we had other contacts, people who contacted the confirmed case, and there were about 12 contacts, and they were traced. The contact tracing went on, and they were brought forward. Their specimens were taken, and really everything was okay, turned negative.
The ministry also states that there have been 20 suspected cases of the disease in 8 counties, including Nakuru and Nairobi.
But these are suspects, so not confirmed. And when the specimens were collected and taken to the lab, all the cases turned negative.
Kenya's patient Zero for the mpox disease has since recovered and been discharged, and the Ministry of Health says it is working hard to ensure that the situation remains the same with no cases in the country. To ensure that that goal is met, the ministry says it has activated the emergency response mechanism, including surveillance, screening, and monitoring of travelers getting into and out of the countries at all the ports of entries.
Already we have, today we have screened 250,000 travelers that have been screened, and there is no suspected mpox case that have been detected so far from the screening that has been done. The sensitization on mpox is ongoing.
Further to the screening of visitors coming into Kenya, the Ministry of Health says it has activated all the 26.
What about the ones leaving Kenya? Are they testing both ways? Come on.
operations centers across the country and has readied the 7 laboratories capable of testing for the mpox virus. It says it has also deployed 120 staff who are trained to handle outbreaks like this. But beyond the laid out steps to combat the disease, should it find its way into the country, the government says the declaration of the public health emergency situation now means that the African CDC will activate its mandate to lead and coordinate responses to the emergency. Brenda Wanga, Citizen TV.
No. I don't know. It's scary. Pretty scary.
If the literature being read to the child isn't entertaining to the parent, throw it away.
Children's literature can. Well, it's a huge problem at the moment with 15,000 cases in a region that's already facing so many other humanitarian needs and so many other health crises.
Some 70%.
Children are.
Sorry, yes, some 70% of cases in Congo are in children younger than 15, I understand.
That's correct. The highest amount of cases are with children, and the highest amount of deaths are with children, which is quite unusual at the moment. And so we are deeply concerned about the care of these children, the rapid spread of the mpox virus, and the many other challenges that children are facing in Eastern Congo.
How much extra pressure does this outbreak put on Congo's, as you say, already struggling health system?
Well, it's an additional challenge. The health centers where we work in Eastern Congo are stretched already with other diseases, whether that's malaria and malnutrition, and to bring mpox, which is which comes also with stigma, which is so visible, which can be deadly, places just further.
Remember what I said about the deactivation or the inactivation of the CD4 positive and CD8 positive cells by mpox when the mpox gets into a cell, and then the CD4s or CD8s that cognate to that infected cell, they don't activate, so they don't kill off the infection. All right. Now, when you're a child, you know, you have a thymus and you're producing lots of, you know, T cells, B cells, antibodies, and you have an immune system that has to be super active because you're young and you're new to the world and you are trying to build up an immune system based on the environment that you're born in. So you have a very active immune system, and that you need that active immune system to be able to fight infection. It's children that have problems with their immune system, deficiencies in their immune system, that start having all these different problems. And I actually did a lecture on this in the immunology module that you can purchase on my website. But the whole point here is that children have to have a robust immune system and be able to fight infection. When that immune system is disrupted, these sorts of things happen. Now, this is the reason why I keep on saying that the aftershock from 2020 has perturbed people's immune systems, and that these things are starting to pop up, right? The RSV issue that popped up, liver failures that were popping up. So, so I am tending to think that there's some sort of mutation that is enhanced that allows for inactivation of CD4, CD8s with mpox clade 1B. See, this is so you just saw in real time how I think. All right. I guarantee nobody is doing a podcast and you've seen that happening in real time. Because they're just not that smart. They're just not that smart. That's the reality. Even the people that are being interviewed for this stuff, they're a bunch of idiots.
press on overtaxed systems, overtaxed families. Many children are living in displaced camps. 7 million people are internally displaced in the Congo. You can imagine trying to control the spread of such a virus in overcrowded camps and in other difficult situations.
So what does it mean now that the WHO has declared the outbreak in Africa a public health emergency?
What it means is the world's attention will now be on trying to prevent the spread of this disease and to help those who do get it. And that's great. I mean, African Union already declared it a global emergency, an Africa-wide emergency. A global emergency means we will hopefully have the resources needed. Help is needed, help on prevention control, help on spreading messages, help on taking care of those who get the virus, particularly the children. That's what we need to do.
What are the challenges in containing the outbreak? How difficult is it to access vaccines?
Well, right now that is not unfortunately, that's not the principal means of preventing the spread. There is a very limited supply of vaccines for mpox. The world needs to scale up production of those vaccines. In the meantime, we need to take the basic steps to prevent spreading the virus. So those messages need to get out. You get it through being in contact with a contagious person. Somebody has a fever, and it is hard to spread if you understand what it takes to spread it. But if those messages aren't out, if people don't know what to do to prevent getting it, to prevent it going to children, then it will spread very quickly. And so that's what we need to do, and we need to do it very quickly.
And we don't really know about the new strains that are popping up yet, do we?
No, and there's still a lot of research that needs to be done urgently. But what we are seeing is it's spreading in communities, spreading in families, spreading through children, not simply adult to adult, which had been sort of the main means of transmission previously. So with spread in communities, it makes it much harder to contain, and why action is needed today.
Do you think the outbreak can be contained? So far, I understand no cases linked to the latest outbreak have been detected outside Central and Eastern Africa.
Absolutely. The world will not be surprised to find cases elsewhere. But the good news is you can only...
A Kabbalistic thought came into my mind. So near the end of the whole exodus out of Egypt, right, there was the plague against the firstborn. And the firstborn dies, right? It is possible that the curse of the adults, their punishment is to kill off their children. Even though maybe the child didn't do anything wrong. But it's to punish the adults. Now, this is coming from a metaphysical, biblical kind of thing that I'm talking about. And that Israeli children may be killed because of the adults and their actions, and they're getting cursed. And also the same thing with what's going on in Gaza. To say that all these people are all lily white in Gaza or in Israel is not true. Totally not true. And so we may actually see the anger of God, the anger of heaven on the adult being exercised through the destruction of the children. So if mpox is a metaphysical manifestation, if it's a plague of biblical origin, and it's a big if, it may be targeted for children because of the behaviors of the adults. Now, again, like I said, I'm gonna give you this perspective that is it weapon development? Is it zoonotic? What's the science of it? And then this little piece that potentially metaphysical. And I'm not saying which one it is, I don't know. But you got to kind of like look at this and go, well, wait a minute, there's a lot of other things that are going on that are pretty crazy. that are going on in this world.
Transmit the virus. It appears you can only transmit the virus if you're symptomatic, and therefore it will be much easier to contain than something like COVID, where you can transmit it asymptomatically. So if we take proper measures, if we do proper screening, if we get in front of this, it can be contained.
Well, it's not the first time an outbreak has hit the region. In 2022, the WHO declared mpox to be a global emergency after it spread to more than 70 countries that had not previously reported mpox. Can you recall the experience then and share with us what you know?
Well, like other epidemics, and this one will take a different form from 4 years ago. We know how to get in front of this. We did get in front of that epidemic. But I think what's really important is to understand each time there's an outbreak, each time there's a change in the nature of the virus, what it takes to control. The messages that worked last time might always not be the same messages. The fact that it's spreading communally in families and that children are the ones who are most affected means that we will need different messages this time around to control it.
And no doubt that's what Save the Children is doing. How else are you responding to the mpox outbreak?
Well, here in Eastern Congo, where Save the Children has a large humanitarian response, we work in health centers, we work in the displacement camps. We've been trying to, we work to help the nurses, the doctors, the healthcare providers respond to other diseases. So this is another burden on them, but this Save the Children is working to make sure that we control infection in the camps, in the health centers. The health workers have the resources, protective gear, the disinfection equipment they need, and that the right messages are being spread through communities.
Graham, we really appreciate your time and talking to us. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, before we go to the next, this is the powdered version of the probiotic. It has a little scooper in it. You just mix it with your food or with water, and take it daily. It'll improve your gut biome, and that's important for energy absorption and better metabolism, and to reduce inflammation in the gut, because chronic inflammation, brings down your immune system. Take olive leaf extract. It boosts up your immune system and improves your cardiovascular health. Turmeric brings down inflammation, and it's an antioxidant. So you should be taking that every day. And you should take it with the ashwagandha root. This controls your blood glucose levels and brings down that inflammation, especially in the cardiovascular system. A lot of people aren't taking multivitamins. It's really important to take multivitamins. This one, which is very high quality, is easy to digest. Multivitamins are cofactors for enzymatic activity. So to have better enzymatic activity for your cells and your tissues, you need to have a good supplement like this one for multivitamins. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the multivitamin. And lastly, omega-3, really important to improve your lipid profile. Bring down LDL, bring up HDL, and it helps to prevent red blood cells from sticking. So if you take this, you're improving your lipid profile and you're reducing clots. And oh, by the way, clots are a problem, especially in the post-2020 crisis, aftershock. All right, next.
Our next story tonight comes from Africa. The continent has declared a public health emergency over mpox. This is a highly infectious disease. It was once called monkeypox. If left untreated, mpox can be deadly, and Africa knows it. Since the beginning of this year, more than 14,000 cases and more than 500 deaths have been recorded in the continent. 96% of these cases come from a single country, the Democratic Republic of Congo. But now the disease is spreading across Central and East Africa at an alarming rate. Nations are worried that the virus might cross international borders. Here's a report.
Africa is on edge. It's fighting a highly infectious disease. mpox, what was formerly known as monkeypox. The African Union has declared a public health emergency.
I declare with a heavy heart, but with an unyielding commitment to our people, to our African citizens, we declare mpox as public health emergency of fundamental security in Africa.
Mpox belongs to the same family of virus.
Okay, so another thing that popped in my mind, okay? I've been listening to an audiobook that's talking about the CIA and how bad it really is, all right? It's really run, CIA, most operations by the CIA are just run by a bunch of clowns, and they get everything wrong. It's almost like a circus. But when they do things, when they do things, typically, they make it worse, not better, okay? So I'm reading this audio book hearing the audiobook. It's called Legacy of Ashes, I think it is. It's called Legacy of Ashes, the History of the CIA or something like that. All right, so I'm a little bit more than halfway. I'm like 65% of the way there. So I'm probably around the Carter administration. So it starts from OSS and all the way through modern day. Okay. I want to read a passage of CIA activity over the years in the Congo. All right. This is just open source on the internet. From 1960s to 1968, the CIA conducted a series of covert operations in the newly independent Republic of Congo, now known as the Democratic Republic of the Congo. These operate, and this is where all this mpox is happening. These operations aim to stabilize the government, minimize communist influence, and establish a pro-Western leadership in this strategically vital region of Central Africa. The CIA's activities included regime change efforts, political action, propaganda, air and marine operations, arms interdiction, and even support for a spectacular hostage rescue mission. President Joseph Mobutu, who became the permanent head of state in 1968, was a reliable and staunchly anti-communist ally of the United States until his overthrow in 1997. Some elements of this program, such as the notorious assassination plot against Prime Minister Lumumba, have been documented in open source, okay? The point that I'm making is that there's concern about communism, there's concern about Russian influence, and there's resources, you know, maybe there's a lobby group that says that they want to have control of certain types of resources. Maybe it's oil, maybe it's lithium, maybe, I don't know. I don't know what resources the Congo has. You know, let's just see. Congo resources. All right. But there's activities by the CIA to be able to control the region for various reasons. All right. So, the Congo Basin, located in Central Africa, is abundant in natural resources as timber, diamonds, and petroleum. So, you know, I can't prove, but what I'm saying is that how do we know? It's a hypothesis, it's a question, it's a research question. How do we know this is not a CIA operation?
As smallpox. It spreads through close contact with someone who's infected, through skin-to-skin contact, or even by breathing closely. This could be from animals to humans or between people. Mpox usually has mild symptoms like fever and muscle aches, which is why it can go unidentified. But the clearest and most severe symptom of Mpox is this: lesions all over the body. If left untreated, Mpox can be deadly. So far, two main strains of the virus are known to exist. In 2022, we saw the milder strain in action. There was a global outbreak, and it affected more than 70 countries, including the US, Australia, and several European countries. And now we're witnessing the second strain at play. It's much more deadly, and it's causing devastation in Africa. But more than 96% of all cases are in a single country, the Democratic Republic of Congo. This is where the newly discovered variant was found. And since the beginning of the year, more than 13,700 cases have been recorded in the DRC, and 450 people have died. A large number of these deaths are among children.
130 suspected cases have arrived here, and of these, 50% are among children less than 5 years old. Up to the age of 18, that's 95% of the cases. So you can see that the over 18s are just 5%.
What makes the situation worse is the speed at which Mpox is spreading. It has alarmed experts, and researchers say that the virus is quickly evolving and therefore spreading faster. Now the virus has spread to other African countries, including Burundi, the Central African Republic, Kenya, and Rwanda. So far, there have been more than 14,000 cases and 524 deaths in total. But experts say the situation is much worse.
The evidence we have on the number of cases, the number of deaths, they are just the tip of the iceberg. And the reason is that Mpox is largely a mild condition. We have limited surveillance. We have limited capacity to do the testing that's required. We have limited capacity to do contact tracing and the reporting.
But surveillance and testing are not the only problems. So is treatment. 3 vaccines can help cure Mpox. They're not widely available in Africa. So only people at risk or those who have come in close contact with an infected person are usually able to receive them. This is a multifold problem, and the fear is that the virus might spill across international borders.
Across continents, one powerful news source.
Bringing you diverse perspectives on the issues that matter.
We go beyond the boundaries to give you that little extra about every sporting moment.
Us to bring you the news unfiltered and unwatched.
Climate change is on our doorstep.
It's just like every time.
It's time for one tree for humanity.
All right.
One tree for Mother.
All right. All right. This one is the history. All right. So now I talked about the science of it, my perspective, a little bit of what the news is saying. Maybe there's some sort of operation that's going on. We don't know. I find it a little odd. Further investigation, there's a working hypothesis here. Now let's transition to the history, okay? The history of smallpox and what kind of epidemiologic curve was there in recent history, and how it was mitigated, because we don't have cross-reactivity for mpox. Now, of course, we have our science is much better, our technology or biotech is much better, and biosurveillance is much better than 100 years ago or over 100 years ago. So you know, so it can't be a complete comparison, but you get an idea that we don't have cross-reactivity, and that if mpox gets to a developed nation, how it may be a problem. Okay, so we want to look at what's an analog. What sort of analog could we point to, right? So the analog that we pointed to for, let's say, the crisis in 2020 was what similar things were happening on the epi curve for the Spanish flu, all right? In terms of how a respiratory infection gets through the population, and there's these different waves. Well, what about a pox, which is a different type of virus, all right? It's a more complicated virus, actually. And it has a lot more capability. So let's try to learn something from the history. That's the whole point of this next section of this video.
Today, not tomorrow, not next week.
No,
Today
no,
is
no.
the day I hope you will donate to
Nope.
support our movement, because
Description of smallpox in China dating to 4th century AD.
All right, here we go.
A quick warning before we start. This video will include drawings, photos, and footage of people suffering from smallpox. So if you think that is likely to distress you,
Before we get distressed, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the vitamin B complex. Really important for cellular metabolism and to improve your mitochondrial health. Your mitochondria is your workhorse to produce ATP. So please go to the store and get the vitamin B complex to improve your cellular metabolism. And it also helps with neural health. So magnesium and zinc, really important for the immune system. I think there's a common theme in this video. Immune system, boost it up. Go to my store, get magnesium and zinc, take it every day. If you're not feeling well because of the cold season that's coming up in September and October, you may want to take a double dose of this. I partnered up with Rainbow Herbals, and we've developed these deodorant bars. We have it in citrus, and we also have it in peppermint, lavender, and tea tree. They're very high quality deodorants. They're made from essential oils from the Himalayas, and it's a dual purpose product. You use it as a deodorant every day, and it also helps to detoxify your body. It has no aluminum in it, and it has no baking soda in it. It is all natural, very, very high quality deodorant. It's for males and females. Please go to the store and get a couple bars of this to help improve your health, help support my work, and you'll be glad you did, because it is the best deodorant that you're gonna get. It's way better than that crap that Procter & Gamble sells. So please go to my store and get the deodorant.
then this video maybe isn't for you. It was one of the deadliest diseases in history, and yet we managed to beat it. The story of how smallpox was eradicated is one of humanity's greatest achievements. And in today's video from History Calling, I'm going to tell you how it was done. I'll start with an overview of this horrendous disease, including a discussion of its symptoms and mortality rates, some famous victims of it, and the long-term damage it could do to those who managed to survive it. I'll then tell you how a smallpox vaccine was invented, the rather repulsive yet mostly effective ways it had to be delivered in the early days, the contribution that cows made to the whole endeavour, yes, cows, whether I think it could ever come back, and what would happen if it did. We have evidence for the existence of smallpox dating back to ancient times, though the debate continues as to when it actually emerged. The earliest reliable descriptions we have of it come from Indian texts which had been written by the 1st to 4th centuries AD, but which may have been in existence much earlier, perhaps as far back as the 15th century BC. There is also a description of smallpox in China dating to the 4th century AD,
and it is often asserted that Egyptian pharaoh Ramses V, who died all the way back in 1157 BC, was killed by smallpox because of face lesions seen on his mummified body. This image shows the lesions in question, though they could have been a result of some other illness, so this evidence is not conclusive. The disease had certainly made it to Europe by the 6th century AD, though again, there is some evidence it may have been there much earlier, and was possibly the plague of Athens of the 5th century BC. It was taken to the Americas through colonization in the 16th century AD, and I'll be telling you the story of one of America's bad outbreaks a little later in the video. Smallpox, which is more technically called the variola virus, affected only humans and almost always passed from host to host through interpersonal contact. That meant that it needed a large population centre to stay active. In small population centres, it would basically burn out after it had infected everyone available, as the infected would either die or survive and have lifelong immunity. It could only thrive and become endemic in large population groups, roughly 200,000 people plus, where new children were being born on a regular basis, thereby providing a constant source of new hosts. There were two types of smallpox. Variola major was the more severe, variola minor was much less so. It is no exaggeration to say that this was one of the most feared illnesses in history, despite stiff competition from the likes of the plague. The symptoms of smallpox were horrific, and its mortality rate devastating. It would first incubate for an average of 10 to 12 days, during which the infected person seemed perfectly healthy and was not infectious. Then a fever would emerge alongside malaise, a sore head and back, and sometimes vomiting and diarrhea. This would last between 1 and 4 days, and the person was now infectious. Next came the most famous of its symptoms, the rash. This could be over the patient's entire body, though the face, arms, and legs usually saw the greatest concentration, and it was horrendous. These painful, pus-filled lesions were full of virus and, assuming the patient survived, would last up to 4 weeks until they scabbed and fell off, at which point the patient was no longer infectious. If one did live, scarring, blindness, and infertility were just some of the long-term effects that could afflict you, as you can see in this image of a woman with severe facial marks and who had lost her sight to the disease. Many didn't even make it this far though, instead succumbing to the illness. I've seen differing mortality rates, in part due to the fact that it could differ from country to country and case rates weren't always well reported, but we're talking somewhere in the order of 20 to 40% for variola major and 1% for variola minor. Smallpox was killing 400,000 people a year in Europe alone in the 18th century, and it didn't discriminate in who it attacked. Some of history's most famous faces were killed or pockmarked by this disease. Queen Elizabeth I of England came down with it in 1562, for instance, when she was 29 years old. The treatment administered to her of wrapping her in red cloth will have done nothing to help, but she survived anyway, albeit with some scarring. 132 years later, Mary II was not so lucky. She died of the disease in December 1694, aged only 32. In France in 1711, it killed the Grand Dauphin, who was the eldest son of Louis XIV and the heir to the throne. So how did we finally get on top of this disease and ultimately wipe it from the face of the earth? The short answer is vaccination. Before I get into detail on that though, if you're enjoying this content, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel with the notification bell switched on so that YouTube lets you know when I upload. For more from History Calling, you can also find me on Patreon, where I share perks including early access to videos and mini podcasts, and I also have an Amazon storefront which you might like to check out. I've listed various products there, usually history themed, which you might be interested in. These two sites, plus my Instagram page, are linked in the description box below for you. Thank you to everyone who already supports me by using them, and to those of you who make one-off donations to the channel using the thanks button underneath videos. Smallpox.
GoDaddy Arrow can get my business online in minutes with AI. Let's see. Ooh, I like that logo.
in India and China as early as the 11th and 12th centuries. They weren't like the super hygienic jabs we get in our doctor's offices today, though. These people practiced something called variolation. Remember, smallpox's official name is variola virus. This entailed extracting the pus from a smallpox sufferer's lesions and using it to infect a new person, often through a small incision in the arm. This image actually dates to the 19th century, but it shows the same procedure, and I must thank one of my friends who's Chinese for translating the text here to confirm for me that it was discussing the correct procedure. He knows who he is. In China, one could also be immunized by having ground up smallpox scabs blown up your nostrils. I did promise you at the start of the video that some of these early immunization techniques were not very pleasant. The practice would cause the person inoculated to develop smallpox, but typically a much less severe case of it, which could be
as of this recording. Sweden confirms first case of more contagious variant of mpox disease outside Africa. BBC. This could be a problem.
The mortality rate was still 1 to 2%, which would be completely unacceptable by today's standards, but compared to the roughly 1 in 3 death rate of full-blown smallpox, it was by far the most preferable option, and the practice spread throughout Asia and Africa. Europeans were a lot slower to catch on, but one of the earliest instances of someone who did appreciate death rate, which would be completely unacceptable, which could be scabs blown. In China, one could also be immunized by having ground up smallpox scabs blown up your nostrils. I did promise you at the start of the video that some of these early immunization techniques were not very pleasant. The practice would cause the person inoculated to develop smallpox, but typically a much less severe case of it, which could be survived. The mortality rate was still 1 to 2%, which would be completely unacceptable by today's standards, but compared to the roughly 1 in 3 death rate of full-blown smallpox, it was by far the most preferable option, and the practice spread throughout Asia and Africa. Europeans were a lot slower to catch on, but one of the earliest instances of someone who did appreciate the benefits of variolation was Lady Mary Wortley Montagu of England. She had survived smallpox but had been scarred and had seen her brother die of it. In 1716, her husband became the British ambassador to Istanbul, then called Constantinople, and so she travelled to the Ottoman Empire. There, she observed the practice of ingrafting, as it was known locally, and decided to have it carried out on her young son, Edward, in 1718. It was a success. She later returned home to England, and when there was a smallpox outbreak there in 1721, she had her daughter inoculated too. The first time we know of that this procedure was carried out in Britain. There was considerable resistance to the idea amongst both the medical profession and the general public, partly based on fear, partly on xenophobia of what was seen as an Oriental practice. Lady Mary was loudly criticised in many quarters, but as her acquaintances saw her little girl recover well, it slowly gained a following. In August that same year, at Newgate Prison in London, a group of prisoners facing execution were offered the chance of inoculation instead, with the promise of freedom if they lived. All accepted, all survived, and one was deliberately exposed to smallpox afterwards to demonstrate that she was now immune. Still, many people refused to be vaccinated, but there were some high-profile supporters of the practice, including Caroline, Princess of Wales, later Queen Caroline, who had her children inoculated too, though her support and that of Lady Mary were often played down because they were women. Sadly, Caroline still died a horrible death, thanks to the many other deficits in 18th century medicine, which you can learn more about in my video on her horrific demise, linked on screen and below for you. Over in Boston, Massachusetts, variolation was also trialled in 1721 during a severe smallpox outbreak. It was championed by the Reverend Cotton Mather, a Puritan minister who had read about its use in Turkey and heard about it directly from his African slave Onesimus, who had undergone it before his enslavement and said that it was commonplace in his tribe. Many of the doctors Mather approached to conduct an inoculation trial with him were uninterested, but he enlisted the support of Zabdiel Boylston, and on the 26th of June, 1721, with the epidemic already well underway, he inoculated his 6-year-old son, his 36-year-old slave, and his slave's 2-year-old son. All three survived and thrived, despite having been experimented on without their consent, not that they were in a position to give informed consent given their status as children and/or slaves. I suppose I should say that Boylston had already had the disease, so he couldn't experiment on himself, though even if he could have done, I wouldn't be surprised if he'd still preferred to use his slaves. There was a huge backlash against this experiment, despite its success, for as far as the locals were concerned, he'd infected 3 people with a deadly disease, which they might have died from or passed on to others, and there was a mistrust of foreign medicine. Boylston's life was in danger from retribution, but he continued to inoculate more people, and the hysteria amongst his opponents intensified. In the end, he did have to discontinue his efforts, but he'd shown that in that particular outbreak, inoculation had a 2% death risk as opposed to 15% for naturally acquired smallpox, and humanity was one step further along the road to widespread vaccination. The next significant advance.
You may not aspire to win a professional sport title. You may just want to be the best mom you can be. And that's where Thorne really excels.
The next significant advancements in the story of the smallpox vaccine came in the 1770s, 1780s, and 1790s. In 1774, Benjamin Jesty, an English farmer from Dorset, had noticed that those who caught cowpox, including himself, never caught smallpox. And so when the latter came to his town, he resolved to protect his wife and sons by inoculating them with cowpox. He put some scratches on their arms and transferred cowpox matter to them. All recovered, though his wife was very poorly for a time, and never contracted smallpox. Jesty's findings were not well disseminated, however, and so he is sometimes overlooked in the history of smallpox. It was only when his results were replicated by English doctor Edward Jenner that people really took notice. In 1796, Jenner carried out a cowpox inoculation on an 8-year-old boy called James Phipps, using biological material taken from a dairymaid called Sarah Nelms. 6 weeks later, little James had recovered, and most importantly of all, proved immune to variolation with smallpox. It goes without saying that just like in Boston 75 years earlier, there were no ethical boards to prevent experimentation on children. Jenner carried out more experiments in 1798 and then published his findings. They were considered groundbreaking. Here was a safer way to inoculate against smallpox than variolation. The new procedure was called vaccination after the Latin word vacca, meaning cow. The cow, by the way, which had been the source of the cowpox, was called Blossom and became something of a celebrity. Its hide is now in St. George's Hospital Medical School, and there's a portrait of her in the Royal College of Pathologists. As for Jesty, he did earn some recognition from the Vaccine Pock Institute in 1805, who gave him a testimonial and a pair of gold-mounted lancets in recognition of his work. They also had this portrait of him painted, and as you can see, his gravestone also commemorates his contribution to the fight against the disease. Incidentally, there is a story that a Dr. John Fuster had given a paper to the Medical Society of London about the connection between cowpox and smallpox back in 1765. However, according to that society's own website, it wasn't founded until 1773, so that story must be an error. Even after Jenner's publications on his work, there was still resistance to the idea of inoculation, as you can see in this image, which depicts people being vaccinated and then developing some of the features of cows. Ridiculous when you consider that humans had been catching full-blown cowpox for centuries and not transforming into bovines, but it just shows that scaremongering and misinformation are not new phenomena. Over time, this immunization technique was further refined so that human-to-human or cow-to-human transmissions were no longer necessary. Instead, a more hygienic vaccine could be produced en masse in labs. Such was the procedure's evident success that it became compulsory in much of the US during the 1840s and 1850s. From 1855 on, for instance, children in Massachusetts had to be vaccinated before they could go to school, and immunization of infants had been made the law in the United Kingdom in 1853. However, conscientious objection was allowed there from 1898 and made easier to claim from 1907, and this undercut the vaccine programme. World War I caused a resurgence in cases, and in 1919 there were 300,000 cases in Europe. But overall, the trend was a downward one, and smallpox became rarer and rarer in the developed world. When there were outbreaks, such as one in Glasgow in 1950, around 300,000 people rushed to be vaccinated. European flare-ups now tended to be caused by the increasing amount of travel seen during the 20th century, as more and more people flew in particular. But thankfully, they were able to be contained with few deaths, and it became increasingly common in some places to demand certificates proving that one had been vaccinated before you were allowed out of one country and into the next. By 1953, the disease had been eliminated from Europe and North America and some small Asian countries, but it remained a serious problem in Africa and other parts of Asia. Australasia and Scandinavia had managed to control it earlier because of excellent vaccine programs, quarantine procedures, and in the case of places like Australia and New Zealand, the sheer distance they were at from other major population centres. The mass vaccination of infants was halted in the UK in 1971, and routine vaccinations were ceased in the United States in 1972. The World Health Organization, or
You know what's in your cheap protein powder? Well, here to tell us is all natural fitness athlete Paul Spar.
All right, let's see what we got. Sucralose, artificial flavors, soy lecithin, ion-charged protein blend. That's not good. Aspartame, soluble corn fiber. That's definitely not good.
Transparent Labs protein is sourced from grass-fed American cows and made with only 5 natural ingredients. So today I'm at Bill's Family Farm.
the World Health Organization, also known as the WHO for short, despite some previous reticence, turned its attention to the possibility of totally eradicating the disease in 1958 by mass vaccinations in affected countries, and therefore the achievement of herd immunity so that the virus's chain of transmission would be broken once and for all. The programme did have some considerable successes, and some more countries were freed from the disease. But by 1966, it was clear that this approach wasn't going to bring about its total elimination. It was still endemic in 31 countries with 20 million cases and 2 million deaths per year. Despite provision of freeze-dried vaccines, many countries still used a liquid dose, and the tropical environmental conditions which prevailed in places like sub-Saharan Africa dramatically decreased its potency due to poor storage conditions. The WHO now agreed to pay to coordinate the vaccine programs, which they had held off doing before, and in 1967, the Intensified Smallpox Eradication Program was set up, overseen by the Smallpox Eradication Unit at the WHO in Geneva. It oversaw a massive upscaling in quality control of vaccines, as well as the quantities sent out. It also took a slightly different approach, not just using widespread vaccinations, but also a system of surveillance and containment. When a case of smallpox was detected, all that person's contacts were immediately vaccinated in order to contain the virus. This was especially useful if done very fast, as
I have a feeling that if mpox gets to the developed nations and it really takes off and there's an outbreak, that there's going to be a push by government officials for forced inoculation of the immediate group and then a surveilled ring around that. I don't think it's going to be I don't think they're going to force everybody, but I think that they're going to force the potentiality of forcing inoculation on primary contacts and maybe a certain radius around the outbreak. Now, of course, that causes civil liberty issues and a whole bunch of other stuff. But the point I'm making is that there's lessons to learn from on how prior societies tried to deal with the problem. Even though it's smallpox, it's the best analog that we have to understand if mpox really gets bad in developed nations, what we are most likely going to start seeing in the news. That's the point that I'm making. The difference is that it's probably going to be promoting a messenger RNA platform, which is extremely problematic. I don't have to go into the details of why, you know the why. So, there's a lot of problems here. Loss of civil liberties. There is the trying to contain a pox outbreak, and the usage of a platform that has problems. So I just keep that in mind. I don't think that it's gonna. I don't think that there's only going to be a messenger RNA platform. I think that they'll also have, other platforms that are non-messenger RNA. But the point here is that they may be doing the same thing that they did in prior decades with smallpox, with a major outbreak in developed nations with mpox. I'm not promoting anything, all right? I'm not, but I'm just saying there is there is a history of governments doing this.
Vaccine could either prevent someone recently exposed from becoming ill or substantially decrease the severity of their illness. The results of this approach were astounding. Within a decade, smallpox was defeated. The last ever case was in Somalia in 1977, and the man in question made a full recovery, and it was declared eradicated by the WHO in 1980. Today, only 2 samples of live smallpox vaccine remain in the world, one in the United States, one in Russia. I'm going to finish this video by discussing what I think would happen if it hypothetically ever got out again, and the likelihood of that occurring. If smallpox were to escape its laboratory confinements now, I think it would be a near unprecedented disaster. We're talking far worse than the recent incident, which is what I'm calling it, as I don't think YouTube likes creators saying the actual name of it, with the nearest possible comparison, in my opinion, being the 1918 flu. Almost no one has been vaccinated since the 1970s at the latest, and vaccine resistance has worn off in many, if not most of those who had it in the first place. For as the website of the Centre for Disease Control says, quote, smallpox vaccination can protect you from smallpox for about 3 to 5 years. After that time, its ability to protect you decreases. Therefore, even if you have been immunized, you likely have little or no immunity today. There are also increasingly few people who acquired lifelong immunity through contracting and surviving the illness, and most of those would be in Africa and Asia, the last hotspots for the virus. The speed at which it would spread with modern travel habits would also be terrifying. As we all know, it only took a couple of months for the recent incident to go from patient 0.
And it's not just smallpox. It's any pox that has similar problems in terms of transmission, in terms of mortality, right? So that's why mpox is moving toward, this is why I'm saying that the best analog that we have to understand where this might be going is smallpox, even though they're different. Mpox and how society has, grapples with it may be very similar to how they dealt with smallpox.
A worldwide crisis, and its mortality rate was nowhere near as high as variola majors. Dear forbid then that this disease was ever released back into the wild, for it would have a virtually blank slate to work with and could cross international borders with ease. Most doctors have never even seen it and may not immediately know how to diagnose it, and its mortality rate could potentially wipe out up to 2/5 of humanity if there wasn't a very fast and efficient vaccine rollout. There would be things in our favour though. First and foremost, we wouldn't need to invent a vaccine, as that has already been done, and smallpox doesn't mutate constantly the way other illnesses do, thereby requiring frequent amendments to the vaccine. There are also large stockpiles of vaccines in some countries, and it is unlikely that any hostile nation would deliberately release it due to the theory of mutually assured destruction. In other words, like nuclear weapons, the fallout from such a release would be uncontrollable. The country that released it would
not unless you have a vaccine program that your enemy doesn't have. And that's why we have the issues that we have with bioweapons. It's not as so simple to assume that they won't release it. Because if you develop therapeutics and you develop inoculations to prevent it in your region, and you release it in another region where you can control the therapeutics and the inoculations and prevent them from using them, then you have spectral dominance. So she's wrong on that. There is no mutual assured destruction when it comes to bio warfare, assuming that you have a therapeutic. And your
ravaged
enemy
by it
doesn't.
too, and I think much of the globe's economy and social structure would collapse. There's no point in destroying the world just so that on the off chance you survive, you can claim to rule over the ruins. Thankfully, I think the chances of such a release are nearly nil. As I said, it only exists in 2 places, and I wouldn't expect it to naturally develop in the wild again as it did thousands of years ago. While the threat of smallpox is something that movie makers like to throw into their films sometimes for dramatic effect, I remember it getting a mention in Mission Impossible Fallout, for example, I really don't think this is something you need to lose sleep over. That brings us nicely to our question of the day, which is, do you think the remaining samples of smallpox in storage should be destroyed, and why? Let me know in the comments below, and if any of you remember getting vaccinated against smallpox, I'd be interested to hear about your experience.
You shouldn't destroy them because you need to make sure that you can compare that to something that may be developing naturally, like, other different poxes, to understand what ways to mitigate, the mechanisms. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Even Better bar. This is an all-purpose bar for your skin. It also helps to heal abrasions, cuts, minor burns. It'll heal it quicker. You can put it on acne to help heal the acne. You can apply it on your skin daily, and what you'll notice is that your skin's softer and smoother, and it has a glow to it. It will reduce itching from a bug bite and also reduce muscle pain. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Even Better bar. It's a very high quality bar. It's all natural. It's made from essential oils from the Himalayas. And lastly, it's really important to take C60. C60 is a very, very strong antioxidant. And you need a strong antioxidant, especially when you get older, because you're producing more free radicals. Free radicals, they damage your cells, your tissue, and your mitochondria. If you soak up those free radicals with C60, what will happen is that the tissues will be able to be given a chance to heal, and they will be rejuvenated, and they will the aging of that tissue, aging of those cells will start to diminish. And in addition, it will boost up the health of the mitochondria, and you'll have more ATP. When you have more ATP, your cellular processes and your tissue processes will all improve, and your immune system will improve. So it's really important to take C60. C60, again, is a very strong antioxidant. I have it in a 2 ounce, which is this configuration, a 4 ounce and an 8 ounce configuration. You take a teaspoon of it a day, soak up those free radicals. You can get it in avocado oil, extra virgin olive oil, or MCT coconut oil. It's in an oil because the C60 is a buckyball, and the buckyball is soluble in a lipid, in an oil. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the C60. I take this every day. It is a major component of an anti-aging protocol, and a protocol to just boost up your immune system and boost up your overall health. It's super important to take every day. And it synergistic with clarity factor. Why? Because this helps with the mitochondria, to help with the mitochondria, and the clarity factor is maintaining focus and getting those neurotransmitters firing. So it's synergistic. It's also synergistic with resveratrol. Why? Because resveratrol is also a antioxidant, and it also helps to boost up the mitochondrial health. So it's really important to follow what I do, and take these different types of supplements and stack them. The key is stacking. Now, this cold season coming up in September, October in the United States, it's going to be problematic, and you need to start listening to me, start stocking up on some of the things. Go to the store and get either the beginners, the anti-Fauci beginners box, the advanced box, or the anti-Fauci deluxe box. And that is your protocol to get through it. And there's a benefit. Not only is it to get through the cold season, but it's also a stacking to just boost up your immune system, and you'll notice that you'll have more energy and you'll just be healthy. So it's a win-win. You're prepared, and you're boosting up your immune system, and you're getting healthy. With proper diet, proper exercise, proper supplementation, filtering your water, training your brain, read, write, try to be positive, talk to people, stay away from social media, and you're gonna just age slower, all right? And you're gonna be more vibrant, all right? There's no one magic bullet, right? One thing to do, right? It's a stacking, and the doing it continuously, so there's a compound effect. You do that, proper balancing exercise, proper stretching, and you're going to do wonders. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the products that I offer. Hopefully you learn something about mpox, about the science, about where we're at currently, with the news cycle, and the analog. What was the history of smallpox? All right. And that if mpox gets worse, especially in the developed nations, what governments might do. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and help support me by purchasing the products that will help support your health. Please share the links. Please ask your social media to follow me. I would greatly appreciate it. Like I said, I have things to say that people need to hear, right? So, and by working this through as a community, we're going to be able to mitigate some of the problems that are on the horizon. Please share the links. Please ask for your social media to follow me. Thank you for listening, and have a nice day.